what I brought is like 4 or 5 main points of the, sorry everyone for the technical term, but I think the technical term is the Big Beautiful Bill
Big
Act.
Beautiful Bill Act.
Yes, yeah, that's it. And so it's really just more like the pharmacy implications, which some of it's like more upstream Medicaid, but like still the pharmacy implications around the bill itself. And I'll forgive us, it is May 22nd, 23rd?
23rd.
Friday, May 23rd. So if this airs like a week later, 2 weeks later, and all this is different, I did my best.
Yeah, it still has to go through the Senate now. So
that's yeah, and I'm sure it'll get chopped up and pushed back and thrown back over the fence to do stuff. But as it stands now, it looks like an overall reduction in Medicaid of about $800 billion over the next 10 years.
Yep.
And really, like from a upstream perspective, it had work requirements or community service requirements around certain individuals receiving Medicaid. So really, the way I look at that, and you can tell me yes, no, maybe so, on this is really you're going to potentially see, especially like in states like Texas, really, who didn't expand Medicaid and probably has the most restrictive Medicaid program, I think.
One of, for sure.
Yeah. You're going to have to see less patients qualify at that point.
Yeah.
Yep. You're just going to and I think a lot of people are highlighting Texas as probably the most impacted state with this particular requirement.
Yeah. I mean, I think Texas has some of the highest child poverty rates in the country. So any states where they didn't extend Medicaid services as part of the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So you're disproportionately looking at places like Texas, Alabama, Mississippi.
Those folks that didn't adopt it, and probably have a high population of low income, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you're potentially going to see some, and unfortunately, that's a lot of folks with insulins, a lot of folks with statins, right? And
a lot of kids.
I'm not a pharmacist by any means, but that's what I know of that population in general. So
well, it also, we're going to end up in a place where we might get a lot of like interesting comments on this one, but like we're also looking at like when you discontinue Medicaid services, you push those people to critical safety nets who also have lost a lot of funding.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see people delay care or not get care. And then when they do go to the hospitals, it's going to be
acute
real
events,
bad,
right? Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Really. Yep. High cost.
So like you're going to
events.
switch from controlling your blood sugar to a below the knee amputation in a few years. That's going to be wildly more expensive.
To the system in general.
Healthcare.
Okay.
So lots of weird downstream effects.
Yeah. And this isn't me debating. I'll say this. This isn't me debating the policy itself. This is just me trying to understand or us debating the policy itself. This is really us trying to understand like the impact and the downstream effects of like what it has to pharmacy.
Yeah, for sure. Short term for pharmacies, you're going to have
a little bit of
a large number of patients who no longer.
I'd call that one probably a net negative in that perspective. Maybe not as much for some of the like. And I don't mean to be a ruthless, profit-driven person, but maybe for some of the managed care Medicaid, if their reimbursement's already really, really low from that perspective, and this requirement is ratcheting down eligibility, yes, no, maybe so, but like at least from an overall care and like who can, your addressable market from a patient perspective seems to be a net negative.
In a truly perverse incentive way, you might lose some patients who aren't profitable today.
Yeah. Again, not exactly what I want to call out as a win, but overall kind of a net negative from that perspective of like patient population from that perspective. Now, what I would say is probably from a policy perspective, a net positive would be the PBM reform around, I'll say transparency measures. The transparency measures don't have a ton of like teeth to it, but the ban on spread pricing, that's a win everybody's wanted. NCPA and everyone else in the world has been touting that one. Not touting it as in a bad way, but like trying to go after it.
To get it. But I think in this case, it was a ban on spread pricing in just the Medicaid population,
that's
right?
Yeah, so, that's the way I understand it too.
you got kind of a win, but not nearly the kind of win that NCPA and the rest of pharmacy wanted.
From my memory, I think it's 70% or 80% of typical independent pharmacy populations are on a government.
Yeah, I think it was like mid to high 60s.
And I think Medicaid's about 25 of that.
Yeah.
70.
I don't know why they didn't.
Depends on where you are. Obviously, everyone's different.
Yeah. I still don't know why they didn't extend that to CMS-related services, because that would have been much more. Yeah, hopefully the Senate corrects that.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. So I think all can agree, policy perspective, great. Probably a win.
Right direction.
Yeah.
Like it's a small win. It's nowhere near the win. You know, like when the pharmacists go out and advocate to, NCPA, and NCPA goes and advocates to the representatives and the legislative fly-ins, nobody was like, I'll consider this a huge win if you just ban spread pricing in Medicaid. Right. It was one small part.
Literally want fair reimbursement. Yeah. That's what everyone's after. There's this kind of weird like voluntary certification on fair reimbursement, which is okay. And then mandates on rebates and fees by PBMs, or just reporting those, some transparency. I think from a legal entity perspective and how they've carved that up, I'm not sure if that's going to be meaningful at all.
It's kind of like the random EV tax that they added. The problem is the federal government doesn't track EVs. Is it self-reported by states? So it's
a good first step, though. I think a good step. I would say net positive overall for that.
I'll take the win in the fact that at a federal level, for the first time, you have pretty decent bipartisan support on correcting some of the egregious things within a PBM.
Right. I would say, and I don't know if in that section, if it was that particular section where they had like stricter guidelines around NASDAQ requirements, NASDAQ reporting requirements. Now, obviously these aren't final, and I don't know if they're going to make it in, but right now they're in. Right. For pharmacies to have like actual guidelines on like, hey, they have to report.
Yeah.
Through NASDAQ.
So here's a weird what if scenario, right? So NASDAQ is based today off of voluntary reporting.
Right.
It doesn't discriminate against or for small pharmacies versus large pharmacies.
It doesn't account for that at all.
And so
agreed.
What was it? A year and a half ago or something like that, when Rite Aid voluntarily reported to NASDAQ,
it drove NASDAQ down.
It drove it down. Now, if you require everyone to report NASDAQ,
how are you weighting all of this?
CVS has now this new crazy incentive to actually show what they're really paying for drugs, right? So they drive NASDAQ way, way down based off of their ability to buy drugs at CVS levels, and then the PBM starts reimbursing pharmacies at NASDAQ plus. You could potentially end up in a worse spot than you were before.
A segmentation to that, to me. Yeah. There has to be.
Or what you need is to find out that CVS is truly buying drugs at a cost that's like disproportionately better than independents.
True. Yeah.
And then you need to have the independents go and be like, cool, I'll pay NASDAQ.
It'll kind of force it.
Yeah, it's going to force a leveling, and I hope it does, but I hope the short term of that isn't that CVS now has a better weapon to pay pharmacies less while looking like they're paying fairly.
Fair. So I would say like between those two, like policy wise, net positive on the spread pricing piece, and obviously like potentially short term with NASDAQ if they don't account for the fact that pharmacies just can't buy the drugs at the same prices like the large chains do. Potentially reimbursement net negative in the short term until they long term fix that, or maybe they come out with a plan by the time this is done, or maybe they don't include that as a requirement by the end of it. So TBD on that. But right now, I'd say the way it stands is something to look out for.
Yeah, I'm going to choose to be optimistic on some of it and say hey. It takes politicians a long, long time to be educated on something as nuanced as pharmacy and healthcare. I mean, if you remember, was it last year or the year before, where the Senate subcommittee had like Zuckerberg and all the execs from big tech in there trying to explain like how the internet works, and these guys are like way off. Don't even have any clue about like how email works or how any of like the cybersecurity stuff works.
Man, that went around social media for a while.
It was funny, but it's also that it kind of comes back to like these guys are making laws about things they don't have any concept of at all.
Yeah.
And so their first stabs are going to be bad.
Yeah. That goes back to like why being part of like an advocacy org that is trying to educate lawmakers is almost a requirement now in pharmacy. Is you have to either be in an advocacy group funding one or actively doing it yourself at a state and local level if you're not at a national level, which segue into some state wins.
Yeah.
So let's get positive for a minute.
Let's talk about some legislators who actually understand pharmacy and PBMs.
We saw, and I kind of already talked a lot. I just had Ben Jolly on yesterday, so like some of this is going to be repetitive, but like Arkansas basically went the path of like,
Arkansas went full send and did exactly what the national level wanted.
Yeah. That seems like at least as I talk to some more of the folks that are involved in advocacy, where they're kind of trying to point the direction, but that like as far as like, and it's not even partisan, right?
Like this was like this is one of those things where like
left, right, center.
It should have been exactly as it was. You had like Republican reps and Democrat reps working together in Arkansas to build this bill, listening to a strong independent group that had good ties to advocacy. They had evidence. They came with all the receipts, and the net result was a bill that was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like,
Iowa too. Iowa had obviously that is a huge piece.
Yeah.
Huge shift, hasn't. And I think there's a few. Benjamin was saying that there's a few on the docket for it. Not quite have made it like all the way into like voting for it or nothing like that. But there's a few on the docket. But also, I am preparing my welcome presentation for Connect, and one of the things I was kind of going through is like I wanted to show a legislative timeline for some high level stuff, right? Like so starting in 2020 with Rutledge v. PCMA to now, and like you look at December 2020, which is it's crazy that it was just December of 2020 when Rutledge v. PCMA came through. So if you think about all of the things that have changed, it's all been in 5 years. Yeah.
And then like even from 2020 at Rutledge, you had roughly 2 to 3 years before any other real meaningful things happened. And you had like the bulk of everything really was 2023 to now. And what you've seen is all 50 states in some capacity have passed some type of PBM regulation where they either have to register as an insurance provider.
Right.
Like they're at least regulated.
Yeah.
It may not be effective, but they're regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to like January 1, 2026, Arkansas says you can't be a PBM and own pharmacies in the state.
Oh man, that's
like,
5 years, right?
Yeah, roughly 5 years. Arkansas went from Rutledge to...
It sounds fast. I didn't feel it, but, but it's fast. That's actually fast.
You can look at it and feel like, oh man, it took 5 years to get this done.
Yeah, no, like how long have we been working on all this?
I know.
You know what I mean? Like,
but it really, really went from like late 2020 once Rutledge passed to Arkansas giving us the roadmap for how to build PBM legislation in the state in 5 years. Like for the law, that's light speed. Yeah, no, really. And again, credit to all of the like really well organized folks in Arkansas. I do think independents actually outnumber the chains in Arkansas in general, like broadly across the state. I think that's true. I hope that's true. I think that's true, actually. I'm like 90% because I think Scott told me that. Scott Pace told me that. I thought. So if I'm lying, y'all can tell me. But just talk about like what a good, well-organized group of folks that can do with like really just trying to get, and I don't look at that like, it's just trying to ask for what's fair too at the same time. Right. And so I mean like, it's one of those things where like you look at it and if you even kind of understand what the PBMs do, and I think this is one of those areas where you have pharmacy regulation that the average person realizes is just wildly unfair. Mm-hmm. Like, these are the same people who are going to the pharmacy and asking why their drugs are $500, right? They're feeling the PBM like hitting them, and so like it's just one of those laws and regulation pushes that makes total sense.
Yeah. And then I did see there's some on the one thing I skipped over on the work requirement piece for like Medicaid enrollees is it looks like there's some copay and premium requirements now that it introduces. So like if some of those patients are like great, they qualify or whatever, there's still the burden of certifying in some way, and also maybe even new copay and premium. I'll just call them tiers. I don't know the right word for that, but like those types of like out of pocket fees coming as well to help pay for I'll just say the bill in some way. So just be thinking about that, and those conversations are always probably tough with patients too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and like I always struggle with things like that for two parts. We're kind of going full circle where most states have some type of work requirement to be on Medicaid in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, and this is one of those areas where like...
That's true. I mean, I've probably characterized it in a way where that's completely new. And it's not.
Yeah,
that's
like,
fair.
Already exists in a lot of places. And realistically, the amount of Medicaid fraud is pretty low, like sub 1% in a lot of cases. And so like I struggle from a human perspective of if 99% of people on Medicaid truly need that service... Am I okay? I don't love the fact that let's just say there's 1% of fraud. I don't love that, but I don't like hurting the 99% of people in that instance of 1%.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing.
Like,
right. Yeah.
The vast majority, like, for example, Walmart has the largest number of working employees on Medicaid. I don't love that statistic. I think Walmart should bear some of that burden. But kicking people off of Medicaid for those types of things feels weird.
Yeah, me too.
And then the other, like when I first started practicing pharmacy, Texas had a deal where like I think Medicaid had a $1 or $2 per medication copay, which seems kind of trivial. But people learned that if you said, I can't pay for it, you had to waive the copay. And a lot of people figured out you could just say, I can't pay for it.
Yeah.
And so it creates this other administrative burden on the pharmacy to
document a good faith effort
and pull in. So like all of these things that sound nice, an idea of like, oh, nobody gets a free ride. Everybody has to work for it. Yeah. Okay, fine. But like
turn into an audit angle. Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like now you've created this other administrative bureaucratic mess for pharmacies to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Now this law may say like if you don't have the dollar you don't get the drugs, so
maybe who knows,
I don't know,
we'll see.
Also a fun conversation to have.
Good point. To like it'd be good to have Trent on from Pass, just to like talk through, like we had a good conversation with him. It'd be good to have him on the podcast just to talk through like what he's seeing as far as like audits, what folks are going after, and apparently I learned about some new things that are just unappealable. So it'd be good to probably have him on. I'm coming for you, Trent. To just talk through like what he's seeing in the marketplace.
An actual pharmacist who does a lot of Medicaid to be like, hey, what's this going to look like for you?
Yeah, for real. So, no, it's good. So, there's some rollbacks on you remember the Medicare drug price negotiation stuff? Looks like there's rollbacks in that. It doesn't seem as wildly even adopted anyway. Like, I don't think this has anything to do with the copay smoothing they were trying to do, but I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of net positive or negatives in this yet that are surfacing. Like it could mean higher copays in some of this stuff is what it looks like. But I think this is the one that's the most fuzzy still.
It's all like the Medicare Fair Pricing Act and the copay smoothing are two of those pieces of legislation where like the intent was good. And I don't have any clue how they're going to actually work.
Yeah. This one seems a little the most like fuzzy. Maybe someone else smarter than us can comment and tell us what that is, or at least smarter than me for sure on that. But that's the other one. The other parts is just like as you get into, I do think something to think about. And this, I don't mean to make this podcast all doom and gloom a little bit, but it's just a real like raw look at what the act is doing right now. As you look at Medicaid cuts, the one thing to note is I do think independent and rural pharmacies, whether they're independent or not, typically have a higher share of those types of patients. So from that perspective, make sure this is the time to lobby right now, is to or help your folks that are lobbying for
one
you.
Of the areas that we always kind of gloss over with independents is like you have this bifurcation in independents really where you have a lot of them in heavily urbanized environments and you have a lot of them in rural environments. Those are two areas where they typically overrepresent Medicaid populations.
Yeah.
So if it's good for them, it'll be good for those groups. If it's bad for Medicaid populations, then it's going to be bad for those pharmacies.
Yeah. So overall, I have one more, but this is mostly about Texas specifically. But we already kind of talked about this already. We know how kind of it's just a big population. That's why it's kind of being amplified at the moment. You're talking a state that didn't expand Medicaid and has a ton of patient population probably affected by right now what looks like the requirement. So, but I don't think we need to hone in on that too much. So, but that is what I came with. That's what came with. Outside of that, I mean, we talked about the wins. There's the Arkansas win. There's the Iowa win. There's actually 10, 15 others actually. If we can find them all, throw them in the show notes so that everyone can see the good progress happening as well. I know Iowa just basically put out if you're a small pharmacy, which was really cool.
Yeah, and did a decent job of defining what a small pharmacy and a big pharmacy was. 20
stores or less. I think less than 20 stores and not publicly traded.
Yep.
You get it sounds so good, but also it's if you don't know pharmacy, this is kind of just bare minimum a little bit, like the $10.68 dispensing fee to cover the cost of actually just
it's
filling
here's
a
a can of
drug.
beans, right? You're not going to get rich off of it.
100%. Just such a good step in the right direction. So everybody at Iowa, man, let's just say, hey, hat tip, there you go, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we've seen anything here that across the board legislatively, the federal government's catching on, but right now I think it's just wildly dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And so the real hope and the real progress is being made at
the state level pushes. Yeah. Totally agree. And they're just seeing the closures and things like that.
Yeah.
It's there's a forcing function now, I think, also. This is
right.
Which is
I mean, honestly, if you could get a couple of bigger states that have a lot of density in stores that are PBM owned, right? If you could get, I mean, dude, honestly, if you could get Texas, which let's throw Texas out, right? Texas isn't doing anything remotely progressive in terms of pharmacy, at least for a while. Mm-hmm. But if you get a state like Texas that's massive number of CVS locations, and you get an Arkansas Act 624 passed where you can't own a PBM, or a PBM can't own a pharmacy, it dramatically
that's a huge
changes.
Shift. That's a huge shift.
Yeah. At that point, CVS has to reevaluate their game plan.
Mm-hmm.
In Arkansas, if it's true that the independents outnumber the chains,
they do. Yeah, I think they
doesn't huge leap forward, right?
Yeah.
Totally get that, but in Texas, where the chains far outnumber the independents, is a game changer.
Yeah,
right. You get a big state like Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania. One of those guys go and you actually materially affect CVS stock prices.
It's probably fair. It's probably fair. I think that's all I had. I think that's what I brought. I know we have Connect, so we have roughly 700, right at 680 different attendees, which is huge. One of the biggest ones we've ever had. I think that might be the biggest.
Yeah. It'll definitely be close.
Yeah.
But the other one that I saw when I was talking to the marketing team this week, 230 vendors.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, a lot of exhibitors too. We sold out exhibitor space months ago.
Yeah.
But it's good. Again, a lot of industry, a lot of business side, a lot of just if you want to come in and learn how to use Pioneer, BestRx, you name it, we're gonna have the whole gang there. So if you're just trying to either upskill yourself in the platform, or trying to understand or broaden your knowledge around the industry, or just make connections, man, it's such a great place to just meet other folks doing the same thing you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, kind of a fun segue of like, I've met some people at Connect over, I guess this is my 9th year with Pioneer / RedSail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my 6th Connect, because we had 2 COVID cancels.
Yeah,
is that right?
I think we had 2 COVID cancellations. Yeah, I think so.
So let's call it 6 or 7 Connect.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you meet people there that are doing really interesting, fun things, and you can kind of watch them grow over that period of time.
Yeah.
You know, we've watched some of them go from like, my first year of pharmacy practice going with one of their other owners who are now people who own, in some cases, multiple stores.
Yeah, and are teaching
right,
classes.
And are teaching classes at Connect.
yeah, 100%.
And I was talking to Troy at CPSN 2 weeks ago, and he introduced me to one of their new people, Madeline Clark. She's responsible, and it's funny, as I asked Troy, I was like, all right, well, my next goal is Jeff did an amazing job getting to know the first generation of CPSN pharmacists, right? Without that, without the Joe Mooses and the Bob Lomanics and, all of those guys, we would have had a struggle in terms of like which features to develop and help prioritize them. So I was like, hey, how do I get to know the next group of those people? And he was like, Madeline. And so I talked to her on, I don't know, sometime this week. The days blend together now. But I was like, how do we get the next generation of people who don't know that they're the next generation yet? And we were kind of like, all right, well, what they really need to do is they need to go to like NCPA. If they're on Pioneer, they need to go to Connect. Because it's not just the classes and the CE, right? Those are kind of, I'll call them table stakes for convention or a conference. Where you get the really cool stuff is before the classes, after the classes, sometimes the bar in the hotel.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's where you meet the people who are doing something cool, and you're like, oh, I need to be doing that.
Yeah. The boardwalk.
Yeah. I mean,
we're in Nashville a lot. That's why I say that. Everyone.
Yeah. This year, like Grapevine's going to be interesting. Like downtown Grapevine's going to get
flooded with rowdy pharmacists having a good time. It's
all those like quiet, chill wine rooms are going to be the opposite of quiet,
It'll be
chill
fun,
wine
man.
rooms.
This group knows how to have a good time. Excited about it. I always leave feeling like I just went to a frat party to a degree at times, because it's just fun. Like everyone's just really social. I mean, these are all folks. They're business owners for a reason and things like that too.
It's funny.
It's great.
Like, I didn't do this as a child, but I saw a lot of like friends in my area. So like I grew up in Garland, where it was like heavily Southern Baptist. So in the summer, everybody went to Vacation Bible School, right?
Yeah.
And so like before, they're like, oh, I mean, and then they come back and they're just like, super jazzed, right? And I feel like Connect is a little bit like that, where you kind of go, and we go in, because from our end it's a huge amount of effort. Yeah.
At least internally, like it's all incremental above and beyond what we already do for a day job, especially the marketing team, especially the folks putting on the content like Will. Yeah, like
everybody in marketing at this time of the year is questioning whether we should do Connect again next year. And then
every year happens
on
that way.
June 10th, everybody in that same group is going to be like, that was the best. I can't wait to do it next year.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think this will be a good one. We've already got a lot of good attendance. So, all right. Well, that's it for us. So, all right. Bye, everybody.